It's past midnight in a silent skyscraper. A janitor softly sings a lullaby while emptying trash. In a corner office, a CEO working late freezes. The melody is identical to the one her sister sang to their dying mother. For the first time in years, she allows herself to weep. The janitor is Leo, a single father of two, working the graveyard shift to make ends meet. The CEO is Evelyn Reed, who built a billion-dollar tech empire but remains shattered by a family tragedy she never discusses. They occupy the same building but exist in separate worlds. Tonight, a simple, forgotten lullaby bridges that impossible gap. This is the story of how a melody, sung in the dark, forced two broken people to confront the very loss they were running from. And it began with a choice: to knock on that door or walk away forever. Leo's night begins when the city sleeps. At 10 p.m., he kisses his sleeping children, 7-year-old Mia and 5-year-old Ben, in their small apartment across town. He drives a 12-year-old sedan to the Aurora Tower, a 30-story monument of glass and ambition where he has cleaned offices for 3 years. His routine is methodical: vacuum halls, wipe glass, empty bins, buff floors. The work is silent, solitary, and invisible by design. But for 1 hour, in the empty executive suite on the 29th floor, he sings. It started as a way to soothe his own anxiety, the quiet hum to fill the overwhelming silence of a big, empty building. Then it became a ritual for his kids. He'd practice the lullabies he sang to them, wanting to get the notes just right for when he got home. The song Evelyn Reed heard was "Hush, Little Baby," a melody his own mother sang to him, a chain of comfort stretching back generations. But who was this man, really? Leo Mercer, age 36, was not always a janitor. A decade ago, he was a rising star in the city's symphony choir, a tenor with what one critic called a once-in-a-generation emotional clarity. He had recordings, a modest following, a future. Then his wife Chloe was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive cancer. The medical bills avalanched. Tours were canceled. Recording sessions were replaced by hospital vigils. Chloe died 2 months after Ben was born. The life he knew, the music, the stability, the future shattered. The choir, understanding yet unable to carry him, let him go. Grief is a debt that charges interest, and Leo paid it by selling his piano, moving to a cheaper apartment, and taking the only job with hours that allowed him to be home for his kids after school. The night shift. He thought he'd left music behind. But neuroscience tells us that familiar music is a direct line to our deepest memories. The brain regions for sound, emotion, and autobiographical recall are intricately linked. When Leo sang, he wasn't just passing time. He was unconsciously revisiting the last time he felt whole, singing to Chloe in her hospital bed, trying to comfort her with the same lullabies she loved. Every note was a memory, and every memory was a ghost he carried through the empty halls. 29 floors above, Evelyn Reed's night was different, but just as solitary. At 41, she was the architect of Veridian Dynamics, a cybersecurity firm she founded in her late 20s and grew into an industry titan. Her office wasn't just a room. It was a command center of sleek surfaces, live data feeds, and a wall of windows overlooking the city she dominated. She was known for a ruthless, data-driven logic, a reputation built after a personal cataclysm 7 years prior. Evelyn's mother, a celebrated pianist, had succumbed to early-onset Alzheimer's. The disease was a cruel thief, stealing memories in reverse. The last to go were the musical ones. In her final months, only one thing could calm her spiraling confusion: a specific, simple rendition of "Hush, Little Baby" that Evelyn's late sister, Claire, used to sing at bedtime. Claire had died in a car accident at 19, making the lullaby a doubly painful relic, a memory of her sister, used to soothe her vanishing mother. Evelyn, tone-deaf and pragmatic, could never sing it. She could only listen, helpless, as the two most important people in her life were lost to her, one in an instant, the other in slow, agonizing pieces. When her mother finally passed, Evelyn buried herself in code and contracts. Emotion was a vulnerability she could not afford. She built a fortress of success but lived inside it alone. She was the last one to leave the tower every night, often past midnight, using work to outrun a silence filled with ghosts. That was her routine until one night, a melody drifted through her open door. The first time she heard it a month ago, she froze mid-email, her breath catching. It was the exact arrangement, the same gentle tempo, the same slight waver on the word hush that Claire had used. It was impossible, a statistical anomaly. She dismissed it as stress, a trick of an exhausted mind. But it happened again the next week, and the week after that. A haunting, perfect echo from her past, appearing like clockwork in the dead of night. Tonight, she didn't dismiss it. The grief, usually locked in a vault, broke through. The studies are clear. 94% of grieving people use music to cope, but for Evelyn, music was the landmine, not the medicine. This unexpected encounter bypassed all her defenses. The tears were not a choice. They were a neurological surrender. For 5 full minutes, she wept at her desk, mascara staining the quarterly reports before her. And then the CEO did something utterly irrational. She stood up. She walked out of her office, following the sound down the darkened executive hallway. The rational part of her screamed this was insane. The grieving sister, the heartbroken daughter, had seized control. She reached the door to the service stairwell, the source of the sound. The singing had just faded into silence, replaced by the soft squeak of a cleaning cart's wheels. Her hand hovered over the handle. This was the threshold between two worlds, the pristine, controlled reality of the 29th floor and the unseen human machinery that kept it running. To open it was to acknowledge the ghost in her machine. To walk away was to forever wonder. She took a breath, her heart hammering against the elegant red silk of her dress. She pulled the door open. The stark fluorescent light of the stairwell illuminated a man in a gray janitor's uniform, his back to her, loading supplies onto a cart. He turned, startled. For a moment, they just stared at each other. The powerful CEO, her face streaked with tears, and the tired janitor, holding a bottle of glass cleaner. "That song," Evelyn said, her voice uncharacteristically fragile, barely a whisper in the concrete space. "Where did you learn it?" Leo's eyes widened, caught. He'd been overheard before, usually resulting in an apology or a request to stop. This was different. This was raw, urgent pain staring back at him. He saw not a billionaire executive, but a person in profound distress. "My mother," he said quietly, setting the bottle down. "She sang it to me. I sing it to my kids." Evelyn took a step forward, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft, final click. The sound echoed in the stairwell. They were now sealed in this fluorescent-lit limbo together. "The way you sang it, the timing, the inflection, it's identical to how my sister sang it." Her voice broke on the word sister. "Who taught your mother?" Leo shook his head slowly, confused. "I don't know. Her mother, I guess. It's just a family song." But Evelyn was already shaking her head, a new, terrifying certainty dawning in her eyes. "No, that's not possible. My sister, she made up that specific version. She said it was hers." She looked at Leo, really looked at him as if searching for a clue in his face. "What is your mother's name?" The question hung in the air, charged and strange. Leo, protective of his private, painful history, felt a knot of apprehension tighten in his chest. "Eleanor," he said cautiously. "Eleanor Mercer." The blood drained from Evelyn's face. She reached out, steadying herself against the cold railing. "Eleanor," she repeated, the name a key turning in a long-locked door. "My sister, the summer before she died, she worked as a summer nanny for a family. The mother's name was Eleanor." The sterile air in the stairwell seemed to vanish. Leo's mind raced, tumbling back through hazy childhood memories of a kind teenage girl who played with him and sang while his mother worked. A girl named, he couldn't remember. Evelyn's next words were barely audible, a truth unraveling in real time. "My sister's name was Claire, Claire Reed." And in that instant, Leo remembered. The sunny afternoons, the laugh, the name, Claire Asterisk. The two of them stood there, connected by a melody and a ghost, realizing with dawning, impossible shock that their separate tragedies were not separate at all. They were branches of the same fallen tree. Evelyn had just found a living link to her lost sister. And Leo, he was suddenly face to face with the one person on earth who might understand the weight of the song he carried, because she knew where it truly began. But as Leo met Evelyn's stunned, tear-filled gaze, a cold wave of panic washed over him. This connection, this revelation, was a door swinging open on a past he had worked desperately to shield his children from. The fragile stability of his night shift life, his hard-won anonymity, was crumbling in front of him. He took a step back, bumping into the cleaning cart. The world of the 29th floor had just invaded his own, and he had no idea what it would cost him. In the stark stairwell light, time fractured. For a long moment, there was only the hum of fluorescence and the weight of a name neither had spoken in decades. "Claire," Leo whispered, the memory surfacing like a sunken ship. She used to let me stay up late. She'd sing that song when I was scared of thunderstorms." Evelyn's professional composure was gone, replaced by a desperate, childlike need. "Tell me everything, please. What was she like with you?" It was an impossible request at 3 in the morning, standing between floors with a cleaning cart. But grief makes its own rules. So Leo, against every instinct telling him to flee, leaned against the railing. He told her about the summer of his 6th year. His mother, a single parent working 2 jobs, had hired a local college student, Claire, to watch him. Claire was all sun-freckled smiles and patience. She didn't just babysit. She crafted entire worlds from cardboard boxes, taught him the names of constellations from his fire escape, and yes, she sang. Her version of "Hush, Little Baby" had a specific, syncopated rhythm on the Mockingbird line that his mother had never used. Leo had unconsciously absorbed it and had passed it down to his own children. "She talked about you," Leo said, watching Evelyn's face. "She called you Evie, said you were the smartest person she knew, that you were going to change the world." A fresh tear traced Evelyn's cheek. That was the sister she remembered, the brilliant, supportive big sister, not the ghost she'd mourned, but the living, laughing girl who existed in someone else's memory. In that moment, Leo Mercer ceased to be a janitor. He became a living archive, a keeper of a light she thought was extinguished. But the real world, with its hierarchies and complications, was waiting right outside the door. The first consequence arrived silently. Robert Chen, the Aurora Towers overnight security supervisor, was making his rounds. On the monitor for the 29th floor stairwell camera, he saw a curious sight. The CEO, Evelyn Reed, in an evening gown, deep in conversation with janitorial staff Mercer. Her face was visibly distressed. Protocol flashed in Robert's mind. Unauthorized after-hours interaction, potential distress of a high-value tenant. He didn't intervene, but he made a note in the overnight log. 03:17 E. Reed observed in S29 stairwell with J.S. Mercer, appeared emotional, monitored, no action taken. That digital note was a pebble that would start an avalanche. Down in the stairwell, the conversation turned practical and dangerous. "I need to talk to your mother," Evelyn said, her CEO mindset reasserting itself, channeling emotion into action. Leo's defensiveness returned in a wave. "My mother has advanced Parkinson's. She lives in a memory care facility. Good days are rare. I don't let anyone disrupt her peace." "I wouldn't disrupt her. I just need to know if she has anything of Claire, a letter, a photo, anything." Evelyn's voice was soft, but the intent was iron. "Name the facility. I'll make the arrangements. You won't lose a day's pay." It was the wrong thing to say. Leo stiffened. "This isn't about pay. You don't get to buy your way into my family's past because you heard a song. My life, my mother's peace. They're not another one of your acquisitions." The divide between their worlds yawned open again, raw and electric. Evelyn recoiled, stung. She was used to directives being followed, problems being solved with resources. This was a problem no amount of money could streamline. She saw the anger and fear in Leo's eyes, the fear of a man who had already lost so much and now saw a new threat to the little he had left. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time it sounded genuine, stripped of corporate polish. "That was insensitive. This is just, it's very important to me." Leo exhaled, the fight leaving him, replaced by exhaustion. "I know it is, I get it, but my kids come first. My mom comes first. This conversation can't happen again." He turned back to his cart, a clear dismissal. "I have floors to finish." Evelyn nodded, a strange defeat settling over her. She had found a thread to her sister and it was already slipping away. She retreated back to her office, but the silent, data-filled space now felt suffocating. She couldn't focus. For the next 2 hours, she stared at her screens, seeing nothing but the janitor's tired, guarded face. She did something she never did. She left before dawn. The consequences began to spiral the very next day. At 10 a.m., Leo was summoned to the office of Facilities Manager, Dan Porter. Dan was a man shaped by middle management anxiety. He had the overnight log entry printed on his desk. "Leo, sit. We need to talk about a situation last night." Dan's tone was pained. "Security logged an interaction with Evelyn Reed in the stairwell after hours." Leo's heart sank. "She heard me singing. She was upset. We just talked for a minute." "You just talked with the single most important tenant in this building, Leo. A tenant who pays more in monthly rent than our entire janitorial annual budget." Dan rubbed his temples. "The log says she appeared emotional. Do you have any idea the liability, the optics? If she complains, if she claims you harassed her or caused her distress?" "I didn't cause anything," Leo interjected, heat rising in his voice. "She came to asterisk me asterisk." "That doesn't matter," Dan snapped, then lowered his voice. "What matters is that the CEO of Viridian Dynamics was crying in a stairwell with one of my janitors. My boss is already asking questions. I have to write you up. A formal warning. Any further interactions outside of standard cleaning protocol, and we'll have to consider termination." The words hit Leo like a physical blow. Termination. The fragile scaffolding of his life, the apartment, the kids' school, the routine, threatened to collapse over a 5-minute conversation about a lullaby. He signed the write-up with a numb hand, the injustice of it a bitter taste in his mouth. The system, designed to protect power and property, had just labeled him a risk. Meanwhile, Evelyn was navigating a different kind of consequence. In her 11 a.m. board meeting, she blanked twice on quarterly projections. Her CFO, a sharp woman named Arjun, had to repeat a question. "Evelyn, the Q3 forecast, you with us?" The room of powerful, perceptive people grew quiet. Evelyn Reed was never distracted. "Forgive me," she said, rallying with a tight smile. "Long night. The forecast looks solid. Proceed." But the damage was done. A crack had appeared in the impregnable facade. After the meeting, Arjun lingered. "Everything okay? That's not like you." "Personal matter," Evelyn deflected. But the worry in Arjun's eyes told her the deflection was weak. Driven now by a need to control the one thread she could grasp, Evelyn did what she did best. She researched. She didn't call Leo. She didn't go through Dan Porter. She used her own resources. By that afternoon, a discreet private investigator she retained had delivered a basic dossier on Leo Mercer. It landed in her inbox, a PDF that felt like a betrayal even before she opened it. She stared at the icon, guilt warring with desperation. Finally, she clicked. The file was a stark map of loss. It confirmed his former life as a chorister, noted the death of his wife Chloe from glioblastoma, listed his current debt from medical bills, detailed his shift work at Aurora Tower and a weekend job stocking shelves at a grocery store. It listed his children's names and schools. It ended with his mother's name, Elena Mercer, and her residence at the Sunset Gardens Memory Care Facility. The clinical summary concluded, subject lives a financially precarious, low-profile life centered on childcare, no concerning affiliations, high debt-to-income ratio. Evelyn closed the file, sickened. She had violated his privacy to confirm what she already felt. He was a good man drowning in the aftermath of tragedy. But one line snagged her CEO's brain, high debt-to-income ratio. It was a pressure point, a lever, an unethical, horrifying lever, but a lever nonetheless. She could solve that problem for him with a stroke of a pen. The temptation was immense. Offer to clear his debt in exchange for cooperation. But the memory of his anger in the stairwell stopped her. That would burn the bridge forever. Instead, she chose a different, albeit still manipulative, path. That evening, she didn't stay late. She left at 6, but she didn't go home. She drove across town to Sunset Gardens. She didn't go in. She sat in her car in the parking lot, watching families come and go, wondering which window belonged to a leaner Mercer. She was gathering the courage to bypass Leo completely when her phone rang. It was Dan Porter, the facilities manager. He mustered all his courage to call the building's most powerful tenant directly. "Ms. Reed, Dan Porter from Aurora Tower. I'm so sorry to bother you. I wanted to personally follow up on the incident last night. We've addressed it internally with the employee involved. You have my personal assurance it will not happen again. Your comfort and security are our top priority." Evelyn's blood ran cold. Addressed it how? Oh, standard disciplinary action. A formal write-up. We've made it clear that any further unsanctioned contact is grounds for termination. We just want you to feel completely safe in the building. Evelyn saw the whole ugly picture instantly. Leo had been punished for her intrusion. The system had reflexively protected her by threatening him. The injustice of it ignited a cold fury. "Mr. Porter," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register, "you will remove that write-up from his file, immediately. You will not threaten his employment. The interaction was initiated by me. It was personal and it is concluded. Do you understand?" Dan Porter on the other end stammered. Of course, Ms. Reed, right away. I must have misunderstood the log." "You did fix it. And if I hear of any retaliation against Mr. Mercer, your contract with Aurora Tower will be reviewed. Have a good evening." She hung up. The power play felt dirty but necessary. She had, in one call, potentially saved Leo's job, but she had also irrevocably intertwined her authority with his livelihood. The balance of power between them was now a declared fact. She drove home, her mind churning. She needed to talk to Leo to explain, to apologize for the fallout, but he would be at work, an idea formed reckless and unlike her. At 11:30 that night, she returned to Aurora Tower. She didn't go to her office. She went to the ground floor custodial closet, the main hub for the night shift. Through the small window in the door, she saw Leo, sitting on an upturned bucket, eating a sandwich from a plastic container. He was alone. She knocked. He looked up, saw her, and his expression shifted from surprise to deep weariness. He opened the door. "Ms. Reed, I've been written up. I can't afford to lose this job, please." "I know," she said quickly, stepping inside the small, bleach-scented space. "I spoke to Dan Porter. The write-up is gone. Your job is safe. I didn't know that would happen." The relief on Leo's face was momentary, replaced by suspicion. "You talked to my boss." "He called me to apologize. I set him straight." She leaned against a shelf of paper towels. "Look, I need to confess something. I had you investigated. I know about your wife, your debt, your mother's facility." Leo's face went pale, then flushed with rage. He stood up, the bucket clattering behind him. "You did what? You have no right." I know it was wrong. It was a violation. I'm telling you because I don't want there to be secrets between us. Not when we're connected by Claire." She took a shaky breath. "I also drove to Sunset Gardens tonight. I wanted to see it. I didn't go in, but I need to, Leo. I need to see your mother, not as a CEO, but as Claire's sister. And I want to make you an offer, not a bribe, a trade." Leo crossed his arms, a wall of mistrust. "What trade?" "You get me a visit with your mother. You help me find out if she has any piece of Claire. In return," she paused, choosing her words with immense care, "in return, I will use my company's legal team to review your medical debt. We have specialists who negotiate with hospitals. We can potentially reduce it significantly. Not erase it, a asterisk reduction. And I will make a donation to Sunset Gardens earmarked for music therapy in your mother's name. No money goes to you." The debt help is a service. The donation is for her. That's the trade. It was a masterful, morally complex offer. It addressed his greatest pressure point without handing him cash. It provided a benefit to his mother he couldn't refuse. It was still a use of power, but it was wrapped in a thin veneer of mutual benefit. Leo saw the trap and the lifeline intertwined. He could fight her on principle and risk everything, or he could accept this devil's bargain and secure some peace for his family. He looked at the concrete floor, the mop buckets, the harsh light. He thought of the collection notices in his drawer, of his mother's vacant good days, of his daughter Mia wanting piano lessons he couldn't afford. He thought of Claire's kind face. The battle inside him was a silent scream. "One visit," he said finally, his voice hollow. "With me there, you don't push her. If she gets agitated, we leave immediately. And the donation is anonymous. My mother doesn't need your name in her life." "Agreed," Evelyn said, a surge of victory and shame mixing in her chest. "And we do it this Saturday afternoon," Leo added. "Her best time." Saturday arrived. The visit to Sunset Gardens was a quiet earthquake. Alina Mercer, now 70, sat in a sunroom, her hands trembling in her lap, her gaze distant. Leo knelt beside her wheelchair. "Mom, this is Evelyn. She's Claire's sister. Remember Claire?" At the name Claire, a flicker passed through Alina's clouded eyes. Her mouth worked silently. Then she hummed a fragment of the lullaby, the same fragment. Evelyn gasped, tears springing to her eyes. She reached out slowly and took Alina's trembling hand. "She loved you," Evelyn whispered. "She talked about you, about Leo." Alina's eyes focused just for a second on Evelyn's face. She didn't speak, but she squeezed Evelyn's hand. It was a connection, fleeting but real. Then Alina turned to Leo and said with sudden, heartbreaking clarity, "The box, in the closet, the green box." Leo stiffened. He knew the box, an old storage bin from his childhood home he'd never had the heart to sort through. He'd moved it from attic to attic, a sealed tomb of a past life. "What's in the box, Mom?" he asked gently. Alina's clarity was fading, her eyes glazing over again. She just hummed the lullaby once more and looked out the window. Evelyn looked at Leo, a new, urgent hope blazing in her eyes. The visit was over, but the mission had just transformed. It was no longer about a melody in a stairwell. It was about a green box in a closet. Leo drove them both back to his modest apartment, the silence thick with unspoken tension. His kids were at a neighbor. The apartment was small, tidy, but worn at the edges. He went to the hall closet, moved aside winter coats, and pulled out a dusty, plastic green storage bin. He carried it to the living room coffee table, his movements heavy with dread. "This is everything from my old room, my mom's old place," he said. "I haven't opened it since Chloe died." Evelyn sat on the edge of the sofa, her poised elegance utterly out of place in the worn living room. "May I?" she asked softly. Leo nodded, stepping back as if from a live wire. Evelyn lifted the lid. Inside was a jumble of childhood, report cards, action figures, baseball mitts. She began to sift through with a reverence that was almost archaeological. Leo watched, his arms crossed, a sentinel at his own past. Then near the bottom, beneath a stack of old drawings, Evelyn's fingers touched something that wasn't child's plastic or paper. She pulled out a small, cloth-bound book, a diary. On the cover, in faded, floral script, was a name, Claire Asterisk. Evelyn's breath caught. She looked at Leo, her eyes wide with shock. This is hers. How?" Leo was staring at the diary as if it were a ghost. I don't know. She must have left it. Mom must have kept it. A forgotten piece of a beloved person, tucked away for 30 years. Evelyn held the diary to her chest, tears flowing freely now. This was beyond a melody. This was her sister's voice, her thoughts captured in ink. "I need to read this," she whispered, a statement of fact. But as she went to open the cover, Leo's hand came down gently on the book. "Wait," he said, his voice strained. "That's my past in there too, my childhood. Her thoughts about me, my mom. You can't just take it. This isn't just your discovery. It's in my home. It involves my family. A new standoff. The CEO with the Holy Grail in her hands and the janitor, the guardian of the threshold, asserting a right he'd never known he had. The trade was complete. She'd met his mother. The debt negotiation was begun. But the green box had yielded a new, more complicated treasure. Who owned the rights to a lost girl's diary? The sister who mourned her, or the family who unknowingly safeguarded her memory? Evelyn looked from the diary to Leo's resolute, tired face. The power dynamics had just inverted. She held the physical artifact, but he controlled access to its context, to the very home it was found in. The quest for connection had led them here, to a dusty living room, staring at each other over a 30-year-old secret, poised on the brink of a discovery that would change both their histories forever. The next move would define not just their understanding of Claire, but of each other. The diary sat between them, a fragile artifact of a shared ghost. Leo's hand remained on the cover, not taking it but claiming a stake. Evelyn did not let go. "We read it together," she said, the proposal a fragile bridge. "Right here, right now, you have every right to hear it, but please, Leo, this is my sister's voice." The compromise was as tense as a ceasefire. Leo slowly withdrew his hand, giving a single, stiff nod. Evelyn, with trembling fingers, opened the cloth cover. The first page was a simple inscription: "Property of Claire Reed, Summer of '94, Secrets Welcome." She began to read aloud, her voice soft at first, then gaining strength as her sister's teenage thoughts filled the small apartment. The entries were typical at first: complaints about summer boredom, excitement about a boy named Mark, frustrations with her parents. Then, the tone shifted as Claire wrote about her new babysitting job. June 15th. Met my new charge today, Leo. 6 years old with the biggest, saddest eyes. His mom, Alina, works 2 jobs and is always exhausted but so kind. Their apartment is tiny but filled with books. Leo doesn't talk much, but he listens like every word is important. I think he's lonely. I'm going to teach him the stars. Leo listened, his defensive posture softening. He was hearing his own childhood reflected through the eyes of someone he cherished. Evelyn read on, entries detailing afternoons at the park, teaching him songs, comforting him after nightmares. Claire wrote about Alina with deep admiration, calling her the strongest person I know. Then an entry dated July 20th. Evelyn's voice hitched as she read it. "Something's wrong with Dad. He's asking weird questions about Alina, where she works, who Leo's father is. He got angry when I said I didn't know. He said, people like her always have secrets. It's creeping me out. Mom just tells me to ignore him." A cold knot formed in Leo's stomach. Evelyn looked up, confusion and dread on her face. Her father, William Reed, was a respected, if stern, investment banker. The implication was ugly. She kept reading, faster now. The entries grew darker through late July. Claire wrote about overhearing arguments between her parents. The word debt was mentioned, her father's voice loud. "She owes and she's going to pay." Claire didn't understand. She wrote, "I think Dad is in some kind of trouble. He's scared. And when he's scared, he gets mean." Then the entry from August 3rd, 1 week before Claire's accident. Evelyn read it, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I couldn't stand it anymore. I waited until Dad passed out in his study and I looked in his filing cabinet. I found a folder. Mercer. Inside were documents, a loan agreement. My dad lent Alina Mercer $25,000 3 years ago. The repayment terms are insane. It's more than double. There's a lien on her life insurance policy. He's her only beneficiary if she dies. Leo, what is happening? I'm scared for them. I have to warn Alina." The air left the room. Leo stood up, packing, running a hand through his hair. "Alone? My mother never said, she never told me." His mind raced, connecting dots to his childhood struggles, his mother's constant exhaustion, the whispers of bad decisions she'd never elaborated on. Evelyn was pale, shaking her head. "No, this can't be right. My father wouldn't. He was strict, but he wasn't a predator." "Read the next entry," Leo said, his voice tight. August 5th. I told Alina. She broke down. She said she took the loan when Leo got sick with pneumonia and she had no insurance. She thought my dad was being a family friend. She didn't understand the fine print. She's been paying him almost her entire paycheck from one job for 3 years and the principal hasn't budged. She's trapped. She begged me not to say anything. She's terrified of him. I don't know what to do. I'm going to confront my dad tomorrow. This is wrong. The next entry was August 6th. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. He hit me, my own father. He called me a traitor. He said if I ever spoke of this to anyone, especially Mom or Evie, he'd make sure Alina lost everything, including her son. He said the debt was legal. He said I was too naive to understand business. I've never been so afraid of him. I have to get this diary out of the house. I'm going to hide it at Alina tomorrow. It's the only proof. The final entry in the diary was August 7th, the day before Claire died. The writing was calm, resolved. Left the diary in Leo's toy chest. He'll never look there. Told Alina it was there if she ever needed it. I don't know what to do next. I just keep thinking my father is a monster, and my sister idolizes him. How do I tell Evie? How do I break her heart? Evelyn stopped reading. She closed the diary gently, holding it as if it were made of ash. The revelation was catastrophic. Her beloved father, the man whose approval had driven her own ambition, was a lone shark who had preyed on a struggling single mother. Her sister had discovered it, confronted him, and been threatened. And then, 24 hours after that last entry, Claire was dead in a car accident. A single vehicle crash on a rainy road, ruled an accident due to speeding. The unspoken question hung in the room, toxic and immense. Was it an accident? Leo was the first to speak, his voice raw. My mother, she spent her life paying a debt that was designed to never be paid. She worked herself sick, and your father, he was the reason. The grief for his wife, for his lost musical career, now had a new, darker layer. His family's struggles were not just bad luck. They were, in part, engineered by the family of the woman now sitting in his living room. Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes shattered. Leo, I swear to you, I never knew any of this. The foundation of her identity, her family, her success built on her father's legacy was collapsing. The accident, the police report, it said she lost control, but my father, he was acting erratically that week. He was. She couldn't finish the thought. The implication was too horrifying, but the diary forced it into the light. Claire had planned to expose him. She was a threat, and then she was gone. The personal fallout was instantaneous and profound. Leo's sympathy for Evelyn curdled into a complex, angry pity. She was both a victim of her father's lies and the beneficiary of his exploitation. The lullaby that connected them was now the soundtrack to a hidden history of cruelty. You need to leave, Leo said, his tone flat, final. Take the diary, it's yours, but we're done. The debt negotiation, the donation, forget it. I don't want anything from your family, ever. Leo, please, Evelyn begged, standing. We have to understand what this means. What if my father? I don't care, Leo snapped, the anger he'd held back bursting forth. Your family drama destroyed my mother's life. She's in a home because she worked herself into the ground for a predator. Claire was the only good thing to come from your family, and she's dead. Get out. The force of his words drove her back. She clutched the diary, nodded mutely, and walked to the door. As she left, she looked back once, but Leo had turned away, staring at the wall, his shoulders tense with a lifetime of compounded grief. For Evelyn, the unraveling was just beginning. She drove not home, but to her father's mansion in the old money part of town. William Reed, now 75 and semi-retired, was reading in his study. He looked up, annoyed at the late intrusion, then saw her face. Evie, what's wrong? She placed Claire's diary on his desk. I found Claire's diary. I read it. William Reed's face went from concern to a carefully controlled blankness. It was the look of a man whose worst fear had just walked in the door. He didn't reach for the book. Where did you get that? That doesn't matter. Is it true? The loan to Alina Mercer, the threats to Claire. He leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers, a classic power move. Claire was a dramatic child. She misunderstood a simple business transaction. I helped that woman out of a bind. The terms were standard for an unsecured loan. She was paying you for years and never touched the principal. You put a lien on her life insurance. That's not help, that's predation. Evelyn's voice shook. It's business, he said coldly. Something you've never shied away from. You think your venture capital deals are charity. You leverage debt every day to build your empire. Don't be a hypocrite. The deflection was masterful, turning the moral accusation into a critique of her own ethics. But it didn't address the core horror. And Claire, she wrote that you hit her, that you threatened her. For the first time, a crack appeared in his facade, a flicker of something: guilt, fear, rage in his eyes. She was going to ruin me with hysterical accusations. I was protecting this family, our name, your future. I lost my temper. I regretted it, but her death, that was a tragedy, an accident. The way he said accidents felt rehearsed. Evelyn studied her father, truly seeing him for the first time. The ruthlessness she'd admired in business had a much darker personal counterpart. Did you have anything to do with it? She asked, the question a whisper. He stood up, his face turning to stone. How dare you? Get out, and take that fiction with you. The denial was not a denial of action, but of the right to even ask. Evelyn left, the diary feeling like a lead weight. She now held proof of her father's financial abuse and a motive for something far worse. But proof of what? A 19-year-old car accident. It was circumstantial, a devastating, life-altering truth with no legal recourse. The consequences exploded into the public sphere 3 days later. An anonymous tip: Evelyn would forever wonder if it was a guilt-ridden employee of her father's, or even Dan Porter trying to curry favor, was sent to a tabloid-style business blog. The story had everything: a billionaire CEO, a secret diary, a predatory loan, a dead sister. The headline was brutal: Viridian Dynasties. Is Evelyn Reed's empire built on her father's secrets? The article didn't have the diary, but it had enough details. The names Mercer and Reed, the loan amount, the implication of foul play in Claire's death, to go viral. It was a media supernova. At Viridian Dynamics, the board went into crisis mode. Share prices dipped. Partners called for assurances. Evelyn's leadership was suddenly under a microscope of scandal, not performance. Her CFO, Arjun, was in her office, his usual calm replaced by urgency. Evelyn, we need a statement. A strong legal denial. We need to disavow your father's alleged actions and distance the company. But how could she distance herself? The money that seeded her first startup, a gift from her father, the network of investors, her father's old boys club, she was inextricably linked. Simultaneously, at Aurora Tower, Leo faced a different kind of exposure. A reporter had connected the dots and staked out his apartment building. His children were photographed walking to school. The headline: the janitor who knows the Reed family's darkest secret. His hard-won anonymity was obliterated. His neighbors looked at him with curiosity or suspicion. Mia came home from school crying because a kid asked if her grandma was a criminal. The system that had punished him for a simple conversation now offered no protection from this. Dan Porter called him, not with a threat, but with a bizarre, nervous offer. Leo, given the sensitive media attention, corporate thinks it might be best if you took a paid leave of absence for your safety and the building. It was a gentle firing. Leo refused. I need to work, but the pressure was immense. The two crises collided when Evelyn, against the advice of her lawyers and board, did the unthinkable. She didn't issue a denial. She called a press conference. And she didn't do it from her sleek corporate headquarters. She did it on the steps of the county clerk's office with a file in her hand. Cameras flashed as she stepped to the microphones. She looked exhausted, stripped of her usual armor, but her gaze was steady. My name is Evelyn Reed. I am here today to acknowledge a truth my family has hidden for decades. My father, William Reed, engaged in predatory lending practices. One of his victims was Eleanor Mercer. She held up the file. These are copies of the loan documents which I have just filed with the clerk. I am also formally requesting that the authorities review the circumstances surrounding my sister Claire Reed's death, in light of new evidence from her personal diary. The crowd erupted in shouted questions. She ignored them, continuing, "Furthermore, I am personally assuming the remaining debt owed by Eleanor Mercer, and I am establishing a restitution fund for other potential victims of my father's practices. As for Viridian Dynamics, the board has accepted my offer to step aside as CEO during an independent audit of the company's founding capital. I will fully cooperate." It was a nuclear option. She was sacrificing her company, her reputation, and her family to try and make one thing right. The fallout was instantaneous and chaotic. Her father disowned her in a furious statement. Her board was in shock. The media cycle went into overdrive. In his apartment, watching the press conference on a shaky news stream, Leo felt the ground shift again. The woman who had invaded his life, the symbol of oppressive power, had just publicly destroyed herself in an act of staggering penance. The anger that had sustained him began to fracture, revealing something else underneath, a terrible, reluctant understanding. That night, as the news van still camped outside his building, his phone rang. It was Evelyn. He almost didn't answer, but he did. Her voice was hollow, drained. "I'm sorry for everything, from the first moment in the stairwell to all of it. I can't fix what my father did, but I'm trying to fix what I can. The lien on your mother's policy is void. The debt is gone. The donation to Sunset Gardens is processed. You'll never hear from me again if that's what you want." Leo was silent for a long time, listening to the faint buzz of the news vans outside. He thought of Claire, the kind girl who hid a diary to protect his mother. He thought of his own children and what he would want them to do in a world full of broken people trying, in flawed ways, to be better. "The reporters are outside my door, Evelyn," he said quietly. "My kids are scared." "I know. I'm arranging for a security detail for you. Private, discreet. They'll keep them away. It's the least I can do." Another manipulation of resources, but this time it felt like protection, not power. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "The press conference. You blew up your life." On the other end, he heard a shaky breath. Because the lullaby wasn't just a memory, it was a clue. Claire left it for a reason. She left the diary for a reason. She was trying to make something right. "I had to finish what she started." She paused. "And because you were right, I don't get to buy my way out of this. I only get to try and make it right." The line went quiet. The two of them, connected by tragedy, exploitation, and a melody, had reached the end of the war. There was nothing left to fight over, only rubble to sort through. Leo finally spoke. "My daughter Mia, she wants piano lessons. I can't afford them, not a handout, a job. Does your company, does Viridian have any work for a musician? Recording soundtracks for training videos, something like that. Something I can do from home at night." It was a staggering offer, not of forgiveness but of a truce, a way to move forward on terms that respected his dignity. Evelyn, on the other end, understood the magnitude of it. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll have someone. I'll make sure the head of media production calls you tomorrow. It's good work. It pays union rates." "Okay," Leo said. "Okay." He hung up. The chaos was still outside. His past was still a painful mystery, but a path forward, narrow and fraught, had just appeared. The story was no longer about a secret discovered. It was about what you build from the wreckage after the truth has burned everything down. And for both of them, the real work was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the storm of scandal began to fragment into 1,000 smaller, manageable reigns. For Leo, the private security Evelyn arranged became a silent, necessary barrier. The reporters lost interest when no new bombshells dropped, moving on to the next crisis. Life, in its stubborn way, resumed its rhythm. The paid leave from Aurora Tower became permanent. Dan Porter offered a generous severance with a strict non-disclosure agreement, a clean cut for the building's reputation. Leo signed it. It was time to move on. The call from Veridian's media production head came, as promised. The work was scoring short internal training modules, soft, ambient music for videos on cybersecurity protocols. It was unglamorous, but it was music. It paid union rates, as Evelyn had said, and he could do it from his kitchen table after the kids were asleep. The first paycheck that wasn't physically exhausting felt like a small miracle. He enrolled Mia in piano lessons at a community center. Her first halting rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle was, to him, a symphony. Evelyn's world transformed more drastically. Stepping aside as CEO was not a pause, it was an exile. The independent audit was a forensically polite evisceration. It found no illegalities in Veridian's books. Her father had been careful, but the court of public opinion had reached its verdict. She became a ghost in her own industry, but the restitution fund she'd announced was real. Her lawyers, using Claire's diary and the filed loan documents as a roadmap, found 2 other families her father had ensnared in similar schemes. Settlements were reached quietly. It was a drop in the bucket of her father's wealth, but for those families, it was a lifeline. The formal request to reopen Claire's case, however, hit a wall. Cold case detectives reviewed the file but found no new physical evidence. The diary provided motive for William Reed, but not means. Without a witness or forensic proof, it remained a tragic accident. This was Evelyn's hardest truth to accept. Some justice is not delivered by courts, but by the relentless daily weight of exposed truth. Her father, though legally untouched, was socially and familially annihilated. Old friends cut ties. The board of his own charitable foundation asked for his resignation. He lived in his mansion, a king of an empty castle. 6 months after the press conference, on a crisp autumn Saturday, Leo took his children to Sunset Gardens. His mother was having a rare, clear morning. She recognized him, smiled at the kids, and even hummed along when Mia proudly played a simple tune on a small keyboard they'd brought. As they were leaving, the director of the facility stopped Leo in the hall. "Mr. Mercer, the music therapy program, the new equipment, the specialist we hired, it's making a real difference. Not just for your mother, for several residents. I wanted to thank you again for facilitating that anonymous donation." Leo simply nodded. He still didn't use Evelyn's name here. Some boundaries remained. But as he walked to the car, he felt a shift. The anger had calcified into a dull ache, and beneath that, something else was stirring, a fragile peace. That same afternoon, Evelyn was sitting alone in a downtown cafe, staring at a tablet displaying architectural plans. She had decided to use her capital, her one remaining tool, not to rebuild an empire, but to build something new. A nonprofit community center with a dual focus: financial literacy for single parents and a free, full-scale music program for kids. She was calling it the Claire Reed Center. It was her act of penance and purpose, welded together. Her phone buzzed. A notification from a cloud folder she'd almost forgotten about, scans from Claire's diary. She had every page digitally preserved. She absent-mindedly opened the folder, scrolling. And then she saw it. Something the physical book had hidden. In the scan of the inside back cover, under enhanced contrast, faint indentations from a pen appeared. Words pressed into the paper, written on a page that was no longer there. It was a short final note, not in the diary's chronological entries. It was dated August 8th, the day Claire died. Evelyn's heart stopped. She read the ghostly words deciphered by the scanning software. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it. I'm so sorry. I was going to run away today, to tell everything to the police, but I'm scared. Dad knows I know. The car feels wrong. I hid this here last night. Remember me, Evie, and please help the Mercers. They're good people. I love you." It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a testimony from beyond the grave, a premonition, proof that Claire feared for her life that day. Evelyn printed the page, her hands trembling. This wasn't for the police, their door was closed. This was for her. This was Claire, reaching across time, handing her the mission she had just independently chosen to accept. The coincidence was so perfect it felt like grace. She needed to tell someone, the only person who would truly understand. That evening, she drove to Leo's apartment building. She didn't go up, she texted him. "I'm outside. I have something to show you, only if you want." 5 minutes later, Leo came out pulling on a jacket. He looked healthier, less haunted. He saw her, nodded toward a small bench near the playground. They sat. "You look good," she said quietly. "The work is good. Mia can play chopsticks now. It's loud. I love it." He glanced at her. "You look tired." "I am." She handed him the printed page with the revealed indentations. "I found this today, in the diary scans." Leo read it under the amber streetlight. His jaw tightened. When he finished, he let out a long, slow breath, the white plume hanging in the cold air. She was going to run. She was going to tell. He looked at Evelyn. "You're helping them. You're building the center. She'd be so proud of you." It was the first kind word he'd ever spoken to her that wasn't laced with resentment or duty. Evelyn felt tears well up, but they were different this time, cleaner. "I'm trying," she whispered. They sat in silence for a while, watching a few late leaves drift down. The connection between them was no longer a frayed wire of trauma and debt. It had been repaired slowly into something else, a shared stewardship of a memory and a mutual commitment to a better future. "The center," Leo said finally. "The music program, you'll need teachers. People who understand that for some kids, music isn't just an activity, it's a life raft." Evelyn turned to him, hope tentative in her eyes. "Are you applying for a job, Mr. Mercer?" A faint smile touched his lips. "I might know someone. He's got a day job scoring boring training videos, but he could do a few evenings a week, if the pay is fair." "Union rates," Evelyn said, echoing her own promise from months ago, but now it was a joke between them. "Union rates," Leo agreed. He walked her back to her car. Before she got in, she hesitated. "The board completed the audit. They've asked me to come back, not as CEO, as a strategic advisor, fewer hours, less spotlight." "Are you going to?" Leo asked. "I think so. I can fund the center better that way. And I think I can do some good there too, differently this time." She looked at him. "What about you, still cleaning at night?" "No," Leo said, and the word felt like a release. "The building let me go. The music work is steady. And Mia's teacher says she has a real ear, thinks she could try for the city youth choir next year." "That's wonderful," Evelyn said, and she meant it. There was nothing left to say that wasn't already understood. She got in her car and drove away. Leo watched her go, then looked up at his apartment window. He could see the blue light of the living room TV, his kids probably watching a cartoon. He pulled out his phone and opened a voice memo app. He hummed a few bars of a new melody, something soft and rising, born not from grief, but from the quiet hope of an ordinary Saturday night. He hit save. 1 year later, the Claire Reed Center opened its doors. The opening ceremony was simple. Evelyn spoke briefly, her voice strong but emotional about her sister's courage. Leo stood in the back of the room, Mia and Ben beside him. After the speeches, Mia tugged his hand toward the brand new piano in the community room. A small group of kids gathered as she, with a deep breath of concentration, played a simplified version of "Hush, Little Baby." The room fell quiet, listening. Evelyn across the room heard the familiar notes, but this time they didn't bring a wave of devastating grief. They brought a profound, aching sweetness. She watched Leo watch his daughter, his face a map of love and pride. The chain of comfort broken for so long had been repaired. The song had traveled from Claire to Leo, from Leo to his children, and now into this room full of other children, where it would begin its journey anew. Later, as people milled about, Evelyn found Leo by the refreshment table. "She plays beautifully," she said. "She practices constantly, drives the neighbors crazy," Leo laughed. "It was a good sound." Evelyn handed him a small, flat box. "This is for you, for the center really, but you should have it." Leo opened it. Inside was Claire's diary, professionally restored with a clear archival case. "I can't take this," he said. "It belongs with your family too," Evelyn insisted. "It's proof that kindness existed in the middle of all that darkness." Let it remind your kids that one person's courage can echo for decades. She paused. I have the scans. That's enough for me. Leo accepted the box, holding it with a reverent touch. Thank you. As the event wound down, Evelyn prepared to leave. Leo stopped her at the door. Evie, he said, using the name Claire had used. It felt right. For what it's worth, she'd be proud. Evelyn smiled, a full, genuine smile that reached her eyes. So would your mother, she replied. They parted not as friends, perhaps, but as allies. Two people who had walked through a fire of shared history and emerged, not unscarred, but changed. The janitor who sang a lullaby in the dark had found his voice again, not on a stage, but in a living room and a community center. The CEO who built walls of glass and data had learned that true strength lies in the vulnerability of tearing them down. The mystery that began with a melody was solved, but the story it started, of restitution, of music, of finding family in the echoes of the past, was just beginning its next verse. And in that new beginning, for both of them, there was finally a kind of peace. So what do we take from a story like this? That a melody, carried on the breath of a tired man in an empty hallway, could hold such power. Neuroscience tells us music is a direct neural pathway to memory and emotion, a trigger buried deep in the brain. But this was more than biology. This was a key, left decades ago by a girl who saw injustice, that finally turned in its lock. We live in partitioned worlds, the boardroom and the night shift, the public face and the private grief. We build towers, both literal and figurative, that keep us separate. But the human experience is a shared frequency. A lullaby, a hummed tune, a song passed from one generation to the next, can be a thread thin enough to slip through any barrier, strong enough to pull two broken worlds into alignment. Leo and Evelyn's story is not about a magical fix. It's about the hard, messy work that comes after the revelation, about restitution over revenge, about building a new purpose from the ruins of an old pain. They didn't become a family, but they became something perhaps more rare, accountable to the same memory, dedicated to the same future. They channeled a legacy of hidden harm into a living monument of help. The research is clear. 94% of us use music to navigate grief. It is one of our most fundamental tools for healing. But this story reminds us that music is also a vessel for truth. It can carry a message across time, from a sister who dared to write a diary, to a brother who never forgot her kindness, to a CEO who finally learned to listen. We are all, in some way, singing our version of a song we learned from someone else. The question is, what are we carrying forward? And who, in the quiet dark, might be listening, waiting for the exact notes that will help them remember or forgive or begin again? The next time you hear a strain of music in an unexpected place, from an open car window, a worker humming on a scaffold, a child practicing scales in a distant apartment, pause for a second. Consider the chain it represents, the memories it holds, the invisible connections it weaves between us all. You never know what silent heart it might be stitching back together. Sometimes the most profound conversations happen without a single word. Sometimes the bravest act is not a confrontation, but a vulnerable question in a stairwell. And sometimes the most enduring legacy is not a fortune or a title, but a simple song, offered freely, that teaches us to never, ever leave a fallen comrade in the field of battle that is everyday life. If you believe that courage can be quiet, that healing can be harmonic, and that our most ordinary moments can hold extraordinary power, then join us for more stories that explore the hidden frequencies of the human experience. Subscribe